Now, let's move on, Ben. And, are we powering decisions that shape the world?
Someone's powering decisions that shape the world, or they're certainly attempting to, but actually it looks like there's been a bit of backlash, which is what I'm going to talk about. So we're going to dig into the progressive liberal agenda, a big part of which involves putting women, aren't they wonderful, into positions of power and authority all around the system. I'm going to talk about that in the context of some work done by this organisation. It's called Verian. I introduced them back in January. They were formerly called Kantar Public, and they're a big global communications consulting firm, formerly owned by WPP, which is the biggest international advertising group. And they were bought from WPP in a private equity deal last year by the old Lehman's brother private equity business, actually. Remember them from the financial crisis? So great bunch of people here. They have a global public policy and communications business. And that, as Mike introduced them, they describe themselves as powering decisions that shape the world. And that includes, using it from their own literature, creative execution of behavioural change campaigns. Yeah, so this is a propaganda outfit, essentially, working with global governance and NGOs. And this female agenda is right at the heart of it. We're going to talk about that in the context of a partnership that they've established with this organisation, the Reykjavik Global Forum, whose express purpose is to put what they call trailblazing women leaders and their allies into positions of power to help more women attain and retain power. This word gets used again and again in this ecosystem. That's all they ever talk about, as far as I can tell. So these two organizations have created a joint report. It's called the Reykjavik Index for Leadership. It's about exploring attitudes towards female leaders. It's a big survey that they've run across 13 nations, the G7, the Nordics, Holland. They've had 13,000 respondents. And basically they asked all of the respondents whether men or women were more suited to leadership roles in a range of different industries and other parts of society. And basically, if you get to 100, then you're perfect and you think everyone should be equal and are equal. And actually anything less than that is evidence of what they call prejudice. And they're very excited because we're starting to see a downward trend. They've been running this since 2018. The numbers have been going up and have been relatively stable for the past 5 years. But this year, they've gone down. So we're becoming more prejudiced, apparently, according to their survey. And that's being driven, interestingly, by young people in particular. Yeah, so young people are now more prejudiced than their parents. More young people think that men are better suited to positions of leadership than women, right? And apparently, according to the report, that's all to do with disinformation and Andrew Tate and social media. But interestingly, it's actually young women as well as young men who are saying this. Yeah, it's not just a male thing. And there is a consensus view forming or a growing perspective that men are actually better suited to positions of leadership than women in almost every area of society. This is obviously extraordinarily bad news for Verian and Reykjavik Global Forum because, as they say in the report, amazing statement for them to make it, our explicit goal is a world in which the Reykjavik Index score of 100 is the norm. And this would be a world where men and women are viewed as equally suitable to lead. Well, nothing to do with whether they are actually equally suitable to lead. It's all to do with whether they are viewed as such and tracked as such in our report. Just think about that. That's a really fascinating statement for them to make. This big multi-billion-dollar international corporation funded by private equity money, hyper-focused on delivering this. Now, obviously, the findings have not been particularly positive. If that's their end game, there are 4 conclusions that they've drawn. The first one, I won't read all of this out. It's probably a little bit difficult to see, but I'll summarize. The first one is the biggest concern is the increase in prejudice that we're seeing in younger people. And their recommendation is that policymakers, business leaders, the media, academic institutions, the whole of society needs to work together to dig into this and to make interventions which can change that, which can make a tangible and sustained impact against reversing that trend. The second point is we got to keep going. And this is the classic double down mentality that you get from the left in particular, right? So they've recognise that their data paints what they call a dismal picture, but there are areas where progress is taking hold, so we've got to stay the course. The third point is we've got to stop thinking that needing to fix women is the answer. Women aren't the problem, according to the report, and we don't need to fix them. The issues are about the way that organisations, companies, and societies work. So we have to re-engineer societies, companies, and organisations in order to meet the stated aims of this group. Fascinating. And then the final point is we need to take a much stronger view about the actions, behaviours, and microaggressions that women and other groups experience every day in the workplace. So those nasty men have got to be put in their place, basically. And we need retraining in order to adjust our behaviour, right? And that all feels a little bit, to me, like this, doesn't it? The famous Clockwork Orange re-education scene, right? The beatings will continue until morale improves. I'm not sure that doubling down and insisting on this being rammed down people's throats ever more comprehensively is going to work, ladies, unfortunately. And actually realising that would be what a leader would do. Anyway, where's this coming from? There's three characters I'm going to chuck in the mix that have just popped up to me from this organisation I think are really important to look at. First one is the UK CEO, this fella here, Craig Watkins. Now, he's been there for a couple of years now. He joined when it was still Kantar Public, just before the pandemic, actually, in 2019. So he was there through that entire period of behavioural modification that happened. And I'm sure that they were very heavily involved in that, like all of the communications networks. But before that, he was at EY, formerly Ernst & Young, the big consulting firm where I spent a couple of years of my career. And he actually ran business development for the government sector, sitting on top of £165 million in revenue a year, right? This is a lot of money floating around in this public-private marketplace. And before that, he was a civil servant. He was at the Ministry of Justice, the Home Office, and the Metropolitan Police. So from a very long career in the civil service, he's gone straight to EY, helped them earn a load more money in their government business. And now he's gone into this organisation, Verian, and is no doubt using his black book to open up very lucrative deals for Verian inside UK government and elsewhere. Really mucky, this stuff. 2 non-execs have just been appointed. 2 very interesting non-executive directors. The first one, this fella, Matthew Postgate. He was, up until fairly recently, the Chief Technology and Product Officer at the BBC. He also helped launch the iPlayer, was responsible for the migration to mobile, big player in the media world. And whilst he is on the board of Verian, he is also on the board of UK Strategic Command within the Ministry of Defence. Right, so the Ministry of Defence is sat right next to this organisation promoting this agenda and focused on behavioural change. Fascinating. Another big hitter this time, David Miliband, the lesser spotted Miliband, spending a lot of his time these days as the Chief Executive of International Rescue out in New York, but also bringing his network and expertise to bear as a non-executive on the board of Verian. And what else has he been doing with his time? Well, he's been hanging around with some ladies at Davos House, where Arlo Brady and the Satanic Tapestry go every January to coordinate their plans for global governance. And all of this stuff is linked back to the same tiny little group of people.
Debbie, I'm going to have to ask you what your thoughts are on what Ben's just reported.
Do you know what? I knew you were going to say that, and I'm trying to process this because I'm like, I haven't got any words for a minute. Can I come back to you on extra on that?
Let's do that. Yes, I'm very, very keen to hear your view on this.